Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So I just finished editing the video which at this point will be out, which was my review of the car, and in that I said I wasn't going to go too in depth because I didn't want to bore people that would be looking for a review, because most people that had watched it to learn about the restoration already would kind of know about SAABs. But when I watched the video I realized that there were a lot of things that I left out that I could have talked about, but I also mentioned I didn't want to ramble on. So I guess this is the rambling on / more in-depth video. So this is just kind of what we have. So for those who don't know, SAAB is a Swedish car company. Most people will know that. This particular car, the 900, was produced between 1978 until 1998. This generation ended in 1993 and 1994 for convertibles. This is what's referred to as the Classic 900. This shape was completely designed by SAAB. This had nothing to do with GM. This was all before that, especially with this car. These cars were facelifted in 1987. This is the pre-facelift style, which has these really sticky out bumpers, which are kind of funny. The newer ones were more integrated front and back. There's also different fascia, and of course the headlamp design. These use sealed beam lamps. The newer style, the updated style, the facelift really would have had glass kind of slanted headlamps. The new ones are referred to as kind of like the slant nose, kind of more along the lines of like an NG 900 or 93. They also would have had wipers. So these were offered in many different trims and configurations over the years. The most common are these hatchbacks, 2 or 4 doors they came with. You also had the sedan, you had the notchback. There were like the 2-door and 4-door variants of the hatch, if I didn't mention that. And then in 1986 they came out with a convertible, and the convertible was only offered, I guess, for 1 or 2 years as a flat nose, and then it became facelifted. So I imagine they're pretty rare at this point. As far as trims, in 1985 they would have had the base trim, which would have had like no sunroof and a few less features, although I could hardly imagine what it wouldn't have had, kind of by today's standards. From what I've learned, the S trim sort of would have had all the features of the top trim, which was the turbo. So there was the base, the S, and then the turbo. The only things that this doesn't have that the turbo does have, namely, is the turbo. But this would have had more upgraded features, like it would have come with the foam wing on the back. It has nice alloy wheels, or at least alloy wheels, depending on how you look at it. This would have had a sunroof, which it does. You could have had leather, but this one does have cloth, something I'm very thankful for. It does come with heated seats, cruise control, power windows. So, pretty decent for back in the day. It would have had air conditioning and a cassette deck. I don't know if that was really a luxury feature. Nice, comfortable seats and a lot of adjustments. I don't really know if that was a feature. That's the other thing with these cars. There were so many configurations over the years. I mean, they were fuel injected, carbureted. There was the mechanical fuel injection, electronic fuel injection. There were all kinds of different models. You had your Springtime in Sweden model. There was the SPG. Those were known as Arrows, not in the United States. There was the commemorative edition. So there were many, many different versions, of this car over the years. So this covers, like I said, this is the Classic 900. The NG 900s, which later gave way to the 93. Changed a little bit. It was kind of less of a SAAB car. I think quality went downhill a little bit. It's still a car that I like, but this is kind of what the purists enjoy. So the predecessor to this would have been the SAAB 99, which basically when they created this car, they took the back end of the SAAB 90 and the front end of the 99, or maybe it's the other way around. I can't remember at this point, but either way, they kind of took 2 cars and put them together to kind of have the best of both. So, and I do believe, it was the back end of the 90 and the front end of the 99. Or I don't know, who knows? It's written. I'll find out and put it in the video later as a caption. All right, so let's take a look at some of the features with this. So the styling is mainly for aerodynamics. So you'll notice the wraparound windshield, but also if you look down the side, you'll see this hockey puck style design where the trim at the top goes straight across and then turns down sharply. So also, if you look at this profile here, this space, it gets wider as we go up to the front. And then of course you have your very wide wraparound windshield, which is kind of strange because if you look at the inspection stickers here in PA, if you can see them around the glare, I'll just go around to that side. They're very off to the side. It's very different. Usually they're kind of like, you know, right out in this area, but they're off to the side here and really close to the front of the dash. So that was done for great visibility. This also has, you know, a fairly tall window, nice mirrors, everything so that you could see out and around you. They also designed it to be as long as it was in each direction so that you would sit in the middle of the car so that you could feel the way that it would be going around corners and over bumps and things for better, you know, for a better idea of the road around you and the way that the car was performing. It also had these vents back here, which were, you know, to pull air from around the rear windows to help with defrosting, which is kind of cool. That's probably more of a just a trim piece compared to the older style vents that they had, which did passively remove moist air from around the windows, which is really neat. This spoiler, again, for airflow, apparently that I believe that reduced air or the resistance, drag resistance, by maybe some 30%. So it's crazy. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it was something like that. I know it was a huge number. So that's kind of why you get the weird styling and everything. It also has higher ground clearance. I guess that was to help with, you know, just you know, if the roads are rough or in snow. I mean, these cars certainly are great in snow. They have equidistant drive shafts, so they're the same length. So ideally, you know, each front wheel would get the same torque, which is really neat. From what I hear, these are the kinds of cars that people would buy before there was all-wheel drive. So again, that kind of made it a nice all-season car. Of course, you have the mud flaps here in the front, and then these little flaps back here. I call them SAAB flaps. But the rear suspension would have been a simple beam axle design. The front would have been a double wishbone. So from what I understand, a suspension like that gives you a very nice handling, but not the best ride because there isn't a lot of suspension travel, although that probably varies greatly among different designs and the, you know, the lengths of each piece and the way that it's set up. So let's take a look under the engine next, or under the hood, I should say. Actually, before we do that, let's take a look inside. So the controls were laid out the way that SAAB would have wanted them to be. They have the dashboard angled towards you on both sides. Some cars do that, especially now. BMWs do that. I think even Kia is kind of copying that now. But basically the way that they wanted it to be is so that when you're driving the car, everything's easily reachable. And they also wanted everything to be visible from where you were sitting so you wouldn't have to move around. They also tried to put all the controls where they could be seen logically, so you'll notice the radio is higher up. In some cars it'll be lower down on the console. They wanted it right up top because, you know, they figure you're going to use it often. That way you're not taking your eyes off the road to do simple things like adjust the radio station. But everything's very logically laid out. You have all your lights over here, you know, your lighting controls and your fog lamp. Your mirror adjustments are on both sides there. And then you have your radio and simple climate controls there. And that's really about it on this car. And then your window switches are down here then. No power locks, so that's about it. You have an ashtray here, and then just storage down there. So again, very simply laid out. Kind of an interesting design inside. They really did their own thing here. When you look at these doors from the side profile, you'll notice a couple things. So first off, on the inside, they're very flat. And I didn't really notice how flat they were until I saw one in person. It may not look flat, but when you see it, it is. And it's cool because if you look at the door on a later 9.3 or 900, it's nearly as flat. It's a little bit more curvy and less straight down the sides, you know, with this shape and everything, but it's still very flat. But this door, the other thing is it's very wide, it's very sturdy, it's heavy, it feels solid when you latch it. This door handle is incredibly strong. Everything just feels like it's just built to last forever. The door jambs, I mean, everything's just in great shape here as well. So even the latches, I mean, there's just no corrosion, no rust. This car did have some rust issues, but that's all been dealt with. But overall, while taking things apart, it's you're not dealing with having to cut out a bunch of old rusty bolts and fasteners and things. Everything came apart surprisingly well, and I'll just touch on that now, but maybe we'll come back to it later. People might think these cars are terrible to work on, and that's fair. I'm not going to argue that they're not, but I will say this. After having a few of them and kind of learning how that company thought and designed things, stuff might be weird, but it was designed with a purpose. And that, at least I can appreciate that. So, you kind of have to get inside the head of the engineers, but see what they were thinking. Something else about this car you'll notice is look how close the seat is. I'll just put my hand here for scale. Look how close the seat is to the outside of the car. I mean, this has got to be one of the easiest cars to get in and out of. There's virtually no sill. I mean, you look at some cars, this can be, if they would have had the sill come out to the edge of the door, it would have been, what, 8 or 9 inches? But with this, it's so easy. I mean, you can practically be seated fully on the seat and then just twist and get right in. So very easy for access. Also, not having those sills there reduces a place where salt and mud and dirt can sit and cause corrosion up in this area. So kind of changed everything. Speaking of salt and corrosion, we'll see if we can look up underneath. But basically on the bottom of this car, you're just going to see the tailpipe and some fuel lines. Everything that they could possibly put inside is inside. For example, the steel lines for the brakes go right back through here and through the back. So they weren't down there getting rusty. Everything's undercoated. This is kind of like some German cars from this period where the rubber undercoating is so strong, you kind of have to watch, because when you go to look for one, even if the floor pan is rusting out, the rubber will hold it together. That's how strong it was. So very, very tough stuff, and definitely has lasted a long time. And I remember just looking at the back, working on the beam axle with running new brake lines, which I chose to do because I broke one of the connections when I was changing the hoses. I thought, oh, this looks terrible. It's all drippy, and this has got to be all rust. It wasn't rust. It was just thick, drippy undercoating. So they really socked it on there, that's for sure. So very easy to get in and out of. Nice leg room, shoulder room. The seats are very supportive, very comfortable, very nice to drive. Everything's just falls right to hand. Everything feels just nice to operate. You do feel some vibration and things from the from the engine and driving. You're definitely not disconnected from the road. Now, they marketed that and said that everything was attenuated, not kind of eliminated altogether, which I think might just be an apology for not making it more of a luxury car. But something has to fill the gap between a cheap car and a luxury car, and this would certainly do the trick. So very cool. So of course we have fog lamps in the front, and like a lot of other cars, there's fog lamps in the back. Not on this one, but on later models. But one thing that this does have is front reverse lights. Also, the headlamps on the 87 and forward models would have had wipers, and they did that till they got rid of those and went with jets. I don't know if these had wipers. I see the little cutout here. I don't know if that was for the models, like non-US models, which would have had a sealed beam, not sealed beam, but a glass covered lamp that would have covered this whole piece right here. So I don't know, but here in the US we have these rather unattractive, at least in my opinion, sealed beam lamps. So I don't know if we didn't get the wipers for that reason or what, who knows. Now I do have this hood popped, but you'll notice this is like a clamshell style hood. It's very tall. It doesn't just cover the hood, it covers down into the fenders. That makes it very, very strong. It's very, very rigid. A lot of cars, they could almost make the hood come to this point and then everything else would be the fender and it would bolt on. These fenders don't bolt on. You're not getting them off without a torch or a grinder. They're welded in place, making them extremely strong. So they were very much involved with safety, but they also wanted to make a car that was economical and efficient, but also fun to drive. And really, I mean, that's kind of a tough act to balance. There's a lot of cars that try to do many things, and usually they end up doing all of those things terribly. But I don't know. I mean, I wasn't around when this car was built. I'd like to think it did a pretty good job. I don't really know. I always joke with people that want an SUV. I say, buy a sports car and then an older pickup truck. But this kind of does both. I mean, it's a little bit sporty to drive, I guess. I'm sure a turbo would be a lot nicer, but you do have a ton of space in the back. You can bring 5 people along. I don't know. I guess it kind of works. Looking here at the engine, this is kind of probably the most notable thing on this car. I'll go around to the other side and we'll have a look. This is a it's a 2-liter 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine. Again, there would have had the 2-liter turbo, which made anywhere between 130 to 180 horsepower. This one just makes 115, again, naturally aspirated. But the interesting thing about this is, look where the drive belts are. They're on the back, right? So this engine's mounted backwards, and not only that, it's a slant 4, which you don't really see, and the transmission is underneath the engine. So you'll see the dipstick here for the transmission. So the oil pan is basically the transmission case. So the other car, there's other cars that have done this. The Mini was one of them, but the Mini, the oil between the engine and the transmission was shared. In this one, it's separate. But again, it's backwards. The main reason for this was that they didn't want any salt or snow or anything to get into the belt through the grill, getting on the front of the drive accessories on the front of the engine. So they mounted it backwards. And again, having the transmission underneath, where does the clutch go? I'll go around to the other side again. So the clutch is actually kind of on the front of the engine, and thankfully this is one thing that I haven't had to take apart. So I haven't had anything open, but the clutch sits right down in this area, and it's there's a chain involved. I can't remember exactly, but there's a chain involved with moving the power from the engine down to the transmission. And this whole unit, if removed, would have to come out as one piece, which is very interesting. The other notable thing with this engine is, looking at it this way, mounted longitudinally, you'd think, oh, it's a rear-wheel drive car. Well, actually, it's not. It's not really a transmission. It's more of a transaxle, I believe, because the drive shafts come out of the side of the transmission, and then they have these long drive tunnels through these massive fenders here. So if you look at the space between the rear tire and the door and then the front, it's kind of, from the outside, it kind of doesn't look like a front-wheel drive car, kind of doesn't look like a rear-wheel drive car. So it's very interesting. But most of the weight is right over the wheels. So it must be very balanced, too. I don't really know what the weight distribution is like front to back, but I imagine it's pretty good. Probably better than most front-wheel drive cars, which most of those are pretty good in the snow anyway. So other cool things on this, just that I noticed, you just have these huge spaces here sort of inside the fender, which is just the oddest thing. Also below, look at this massive area that the battery sits on. I mean, it's huge. The expanse of metal going up and down and also side to side, I mean, it must be so strong. And all the subframe underneath and the cross members on the front and the hood over top. I mean, this just must be an incredibly safe car. I know one thing that they designed this to do in a crash was that the engine and transmission would go underneath the vehicle rather than into the cabin. So they were kind of looking out for you there. Again, very safe. This isn't stuff that you'd necessarily read about in the owner's manual or in a brochure, but it was stuff they were thinking about, and I don't know, maybe enough people didn't appreciate it or what, but it's certainly cool, certainly worth mentioning. So probably not the easiest to work on. There's not a lot of access back here. I wouldn't be a huge fan of working on that, but everything else is decent to service. Notice all the caps, nice big dipstick and fill tube for the oil there, and one for the transmission here. So there's a lot of cars out there, like take the Mercedes for example. There's no dipstick for the oil, which is not real great. And also the other cars, you have to pull out a bolt and check the oil level in the transmission, but with this they give you a dipstick. Also, this takes 10W30, so it's very easy to drain and change. I'm not gonna, no, I will get down on the ground. I'll show you. This is just another cool thing as far as like oil changes and stuff goes. That's your drain plug right there, right in the front, and the one for the transmission is in the back, and they are labeled. So if you can read, you're not going to drain the wrong fluid by mistake. The oil filter is a little tricky to get down or get to here. It's not so much that it's hard to get to as much as just when you take that apart, oil's going to go everywhere. You'll want to hose that off when you're done. But very simple to change the oil, drain the oil. I don't even have to get it up on jacks with the drain pan that I have, which is just a regular drain pan. So very easy to service. Spark plugs are easy to get to on the other side. The fuel filter is right up here, easy to get to. So pretty simple. Also, in my experience, anytime I change coolant on a Saab, bleeding the cooling system doesn't take very long. They're pretty much bled right from the start. I mean, I'll sit and watch for bubbles, but there's pretty much nothing. Again, you've got your reservoir there. Brake fluid's right here, you know, so pretty simple. Nice clear cover for the fuses and relays, very neat. Each one, the label of what it is right there, very easy to match up. There's spares, they give you a fuse puller inside, everything's there that you could possibly need, so very nice stuff. Some of the other stuff's a little harder to get to. The starter's down inside here, the alternator's back here, so that would be a little tricky. The power steering pump is on the other side there, but not too bad, not terrible. A lot of space on the other side there as well. And this uses Bosch K-Jetronic fuel injection. So my recommendation, my personal recommendation, is that if you have a car with this fuel system, you know, buy good fuel, take care of oh, I don't know, just drive it and keep fresh fuel in it. Don't let it sit, don't let it get gummed up. That's what caused a lot of damage on this car. In fact, everything with the fuel injection system, or the entire fuel system I should say, every single piece of it had to be redone except replacing the fuel lines. Those were fine, but you know, and it just goes on and on with this. Warm-up regulator, cold start injector, there's the distributor, there's the flap inside. You'll do the filter with that. There's 2 fuel pumps on the 85s and possibly the 84s, and a little bit before then. This was before they switched to 1 pump. There's fuel injectors there as well. I mean, there's accumulators. Yeah, try finding an accumulator for this. I had to order one from the Netherlands. It's just crazy. So, you know, just keep an eye on that stuff. It's a little bit tricky. I'm sure that one with electronic fuel injection is probably better in every single way, but this car presented itself, and we're going with it. Also, this, let's flip this up 1 second here. So this also gives you your paint and trim colors right on top. So very easy to buy replacement paint for this car, which is very cool. They also give you warning labels in multiple languages there, and a nice metal plate there for the VIN number and other specifications. Notice the air conditioner right up here, or the evaporator coil I should say, and then this cover for recirculation. It pulls air right through the hood, making it an asymmetrical hood, but it doesn't come through the cowl. I suspect that that's so that if you're driving in the winter, you always get that snow and slush that builds up in that area, and if it's from the hood, if you're pulling air from the hood, that's not likely to happen. Also, look at the wipers on this car. So both of them mount kind of in the center, but they're very off to the side. Most cars, they're a little bit more oriented towards the driver's side, not so much towards the passenger side. The other thing is that the wiper on the right, you know, you can kind of see the path of it. It kind of comes up the whole way over to this side, and then the one on the passenger side only makes like 1/3 of a revolution. So like 1/3 and then 2/3, but it covers a good portion of the windshield, which is very cool. So that's another part about that. And I forget what I was going to talk about next. Let me revisit that. The next thing I wanted to talk about, I just had to refer to the book for a quick cheat sheet. But basically, this engine, by the way, so again, 2.4 liter, but this one's an 8-valve engine. This is the B engine, as it's referred to. This did give way to a 16-valve H engine, which, by the way, this 4-cylinder is half of a Triumph V8. So Triumph had this, stopped using this engine back in the 80s. Saab sort of split it in half and re-engineered it, and made it quite a bit more reliable and more powerful. In addition to the 5-speed manual, there was also a 4-speed manual before that, but then later 3-speed automatic was available, or I guess throughout the whole range. They switched to the 5. I'm not sure when they switched to the 5, but there was only ever a 3-speed automatic with no overdrive, so the 5-speed is the one to have. Also, we'll just kind of look around here at the back. Oh, it's locked. I guess we'll get the keys and then look at the back. This car also had a lot of firsts. You know, I believe that Saab invented the whole idea of heated seats, although I could be wrong about that. That's what I've read, but I don't think that information has been cited, so I can't speak for that. I've also heard the same thing about ventilated seats. That I'm a little more doubtful of. This was definitely the first car in the world to have asbestos-free brake pads. And while we're on brakes, the disc brakes all round, no drums. The emergency brake acts on the front wheels, which is kind of strange on this car. Also very interesting calipers. The pre-87 brake calipers are kind of hard to find, so I guess, and again, this car presented itself, so we went with it, but my recommendation would be to probably look for an 87 or newer. I think there's a lot more parts available, and I think it's probably a slightly better car to use and to own. But again, this one just kind of came up, and it's just unbelievably beautiful, and that's what sold me on it. But again, look at the nice, just nice huge space back here. I mean, there's just a huge trunk, very wide. You could fit pretty much anything in there. The trunk opening is huge. It really looks, I mean, it just towers over the car. It just looks silly. So yes, asbestos-free brake pads. It also was the first car to have a cabin air filter, and apparently it also had a very efficient, heating and air conditioning system as well. So yeah, Saab. I mean, Saab. The thing with Saab is that they don't have more innovations than like companies like Mercedes, but the thing is, when you look at how small of a company they were and then how many innovations they had, it's pretty impressive, as well as the fact that they had a lot of crazy ideas. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. I mean, let's not forget, everything today, all cars today pretty much are either turbocharged or they often offer a turbocharged option, and Saab was the first to kind of go with turbocharging for their mainstream cars. It wasn't a performance option, that's just what they were choosing to do, and they kind of perfected that with the intercooler. They had water injection before that, and then they had everything controlled with electronics, which provided a lot of reliability. So as you drive your mid-size SUV and appreciate something from an American company, just realize that it really all started here. So I think that's kind of an important thing. But I know there's a lot of really well-built European cars out there that have lasted for years, but when you look at this one here, this car has 223,000 miles on it. I'm the second owner, and granted, it's been from what I'm told, garage kept. But just look at this. I mean, this is original paint except for a couple patches. Everything is just in phenomenal shape. It hasn't been in an accident. It's beautiful. I mean, this is just very well lasted. We're missing a couple rubber trim pieces here. These would always go this kind of metal trim, but beautiful pinstriping there. Everything's just in really nice shape. The paint is great. These cars were known for rusting out around the doors, around the rear arches, and around the hood. You also have to watch the fenders in those big recesses at the front corner and also at the back, but I think mainly the front you have to watch for that. That was one area that did have to be patched on this. But just just beautiful overall for something to last this long with just that was meant to be used. That's just hugely impressive. I mean, this wasn't, yeah, well, okay, it was garage kept, but I mean, this car was used. Let's look at the odometer. I mean, 223,828, and just since I've restored it, that's been the trip meter going. So restored, I did a bunch of work on it. Follow the series, find out. But anyway, 285 miles that I've driven it. So I've driven this at night, I've driven it in the rain, I've drove it yesterday when it was 95, I drove it when it was 40 and chilly. I mean, it just does great. I really have no complaints with it. It would be such a cool car to drive and to use, and that kind of explains why you see a lot of these cars now, relatively speaking. I mean, you're not going to see one of these on the road every day. You might not even see one this nice except for at a meet, but this is a car that you could use. You could still use this car today. It still sort of fits in with most vehicles. It's not something that you're going to have to worry about all the time. I believe the mechanical fuel injection, if it's set up properly and everything is in good functioning order, it is quite reliable. I know it doesn't have an electronic control unit, so it's a little bit simpler, I guess, in that regard. I'd still probably have electronic, to be honest, but whatever. So very cool. These rear windows do flip out, and these headrests in the back are adjustable, as well as the ones in the front. Well, just thought I'd throw that in, I guess. But overall, pretty decent car. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been working on since about last September, and as I'm making this video, it's just the beginning of June. But what a neat project. I've learned so many things, I met so many people, learned so much about these cars in particular. It's just been so much fun. I have this BMW that I drove up here to make this video, but this is another fun car. I've been driving this weekend, and also the Saab, and I have to say, they're well, that BMW, that's just the 323, so that's not too powerful, but this one's almost as fast, I guess, and it's just as fun, but for totally different reasons. And for 115 horsepower, You'd think this car would be a dog. It's not as slow as you think. It's not too bad. I mean, the weight here, let's see, on this particular one, yeah, 2,000, what is that, 2,000 pounds? Oh, 3,710. So it's not exactly a light car, but it actually, I thought it was a lot less than that, but anyway. But doesn't do too bad, and I think the 5-speed helps that a lot, but it's pretty fun to use in that regard. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, hope you learned some things about the 900. This probably is not going to be the most informational video out there. There's a lot of people that probably have ones that are more in depth than this, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to do this car justice while I can. So between this, you have got the whole project to watch. You've got my sort of basic tour and then this more in-depth look. So hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Check out my channel for more info.